works. Just a second. Sorry. Jeff, I'm recording a class right now. I'll have to call you back. Sorry about that.
I thought my recording indicator had changed. All right, we are recording, so welcome to episode 7, students. This is the final one for this semester, episode 7, and it's going to be fantastic. Got 2 wonderful poets for you, Katrina Canyon and William Gonzalez. We're going to meet Katrina first, and I want to give her a chance to say something to you right now as I bring up her poems. Go ahead, Katrina.
Hi, students. It's nice to meet you. My name is Katrina Canyon. I am a poet originally from Los Angeles. I served as Poet Laureate of Sunland Tujunga. I am currently living in Seattle, Washington, where I do civil rights and still write poetry. I have a book coming out in December, and a lot of the work that you will be reading now will be in that book. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, please let Don know, and he can happily forward them on to me, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you, Don, for having me.
Thank you, Katrina. We're ready. So if you want to say anything about Phoenix, go ahead.
Phoenix is a poem I wrote based on my illness with lupus. I wrote it in the hospital room, and it was a reflection on how I was feeling at the time. Phoenix. My spirit animal is the phoenix. She sits as a chick on the windowsill of my hospital room and grows impatient, having burned to ash 3 days ago. She toddles along the cement against the dark, cloudy Seattle skyline, pecks at dead bugs, and waits for the sunrise. Her feathers, black tufts of mists, sway with the wind. When she can, she will leap from the sill and fly, and will likely burn to ash again. She cannot stop herself from flying straight towards the sun.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Fantastic poem, fantastic idea for a poem to write about your spirit animal. What animal do you relate to? And get into it.
Yeah, I've often felt like the phoenix because of a lot of things I go through with, especially with lupus or depression, where I completely just burn myself out and then I have to sit and start over again. And I felt a lot of that when I was in the hospital. I wrote this poem about a year and a half ago, and I just was just looking out, and everything I saw was just rebirth. And you can see that in this poem. uh, the dead chick, the sunrise, the clouds, mists, and
Picks at dead bugs.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Black tufts of mists.
yeah, and it's
Beautiful
like
imagery here. Beautiful imagery.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, that was just a starter. Now for something really heavy duty.
Oh my gosh, I put this one in there.
4-page poem. Get ready, everybody.
This one's called I Left Out Bells and Whistles, and there's this app, I think it's called Time Machine, where uh, that's put out by Webster's Dictionary or Merriam-Webster's Dictionary, where you can put in a year and it will tell you all the words that came to use during that year.
Mm.
So these are some words from the year I was born, which was 1968.
Wow.
And it's called I Left Out Bells and Whistles, which was a term that came to birth when I was born. The year I was born was the same year the term assault weapon was born. Assault weapon means any various automatic or semi automatic firearms. Assault weapons could have easily served as pacifiers in my South Central Los Angeles home. I was 7 the first time I remember holding one. Another phrase born with me is band aid, which means offering, making use of, or serving as a temporary or expedient remedy or solution. Band aids, which stuck to my skin like pieces of mismatched patchwork, band aids taught me the meaning of flesh toned. When we didn't have band aids, we used tissue, which is basically a poor band aid. Another term born with me is magnet school. A magnet school is a school with superior facilities and staff and often a specialized curriculum designed to attract pupils from throughout a city or school district. Magnet schools were initially a tool for desegregation. I went to a gifted magnet school in Ladera Heights. I was often teased for having old clothes. Next birth phrase, black on black, meaning an altercation involving a black person against another black person. Newscasters say things like, black on black crime plagues our communities. Plague and black often go together, like PCP and Sherman cigarettes, which also plagued black communities. PCP means phenylcyclidine, a piperidine derivative C17H25N, used chiefly in the form of its hydrochloride, especially as a veterinary anesthetic, and sometimes illicitly as a psychedelic drug. PCB was born with me. I think my father picked us up from the hospital at the same time. Here's one that will surprise you: coronavirus, meaning any of a family of large single stranded RNA viruses that have a lipid envelope studded with club shaped spike proteins. Infect birds and many mammals, including humans, and include the causative agents of MERS, SARS, and COVID 19. Blacks are 5 times more likely to die from coronavirus than whites. COVID 19 is also called the Black Plague. Another birth word, delegitimize, which means to diminish or destroy the legitimacy, prestige, or authority of. White people like to say that I'm playing the race card to delegitimize my argument. Delegitimize is my twin, and we are inseparable. Russia delegitimizes the election. All Lives Matter delegitimizes Black Lives Matter. Confederate statues delegitimize racial struggles. Voting law often delegitimizes the black vote. Another word born with me is SWAT, which means a police or military unit specially trained and equipped to handle unusually hazardous situations or missions. SWAT officers are expert users of assault weapons. SWAT broke into my backyard and obtained access to my house to get a view of my white neighbor, who coincidentally was the voice of Bugs Bunny, Tasmanian Devil, and Mr. Magoo. He held 2 women hostage with an assault weapon. He was back home by midnight. Today, SWAT used beanbags to kill a black man laying on the ground while his children watched. SWAT delegitimized black life. Authorities who allow abuse of power delegitimize black life. Laws that lack accountability delegitimize black life. My final birth phrase, peace sign, meaning a sign made by holding the palm outward and forming a V with the index and middle fingers, and used to indicate the desire for peace.
Woo-hoo. Yeah.
It was fire. Loved it, Katrina.
Thank you, William.
Loved it. I
So,
loved how you connected the Black Plague to the COVID-19, and that historical connection is beautiful. It's a very interesting poem. Thank you very much.
thanks. When I went after this. It was a writing prompt in Poets and Writers, and I did not expect it to come out this way. I said, "Oh, fun! I'm going to go after these words and just write a kitschy poem about the words that were born the year I was born." And I think that's when I realized a lot of things, that what it means to be a Black poet and what it means to be an African American, that there are always words that are used as weapons against minority population. And these words, they were all developed as weapons against us. And so I feel like with this poem, I'm taking the power back and showing what these words truly mean. At least that's what I'm trying to do.
You know, two things. One, Poets and Writers had a good writing idea. But thanks to what came from your year and the fact that you are someone who knows the weight of these words, you were able to handle it in a way that was very direct and straightforward. And I like to think anyone can understand the weight of what you're saying. That is truly inspirational. Makes me want to go look at my year, but I don't think my year is going to hold a candle to yours.
You never know.
But I'm going to look into it. I'm going to look into it. And these young people, wow, every year new words come into being, and there's a new list every year. It's worth checking out. You'll be surprised. Okay.
Yeah, even things like Band-Aid, where you think Band-Aid is pretty innocuous, but when you think of the context that Band-Aids only came in one color, and they called it flesh toned, and it wasn't flesh toned for me.
Yeah. Words have a weight. And the person you're talking about here, this could be from today's news, right? There was that lady who was part of the Capitol insurrection, and she wanted to go on vacation to Mexico.
Yeah.
And the judge let her? What? I don't understand justice, but okay. And now something different.
Yeah, this one is definitely in my new book, and this one is called Aunt May, and I like this one because it takes me back to a time when I was younger, but it also draws back uh, toward my heritage and toward my family, which I tried to do with that book quite a bit, was go back not only to my family but to those who came before me, like my ancestors, and it addresses both my Black and white side, but this in particular talks about my Aunt May. Aunt May. She cries at the stereo as if it could take her to heaven on the notes of ZZ Hill's Down Home Blues every other record or two. Uncle Eljo, that no good son of a bitch, held her heart in a vice. Then he died, relegating him to the beloved angel he never was, fleeing into mangled clouds on shredded wings made of brambles as if Texas soil were fertile. Hill's throat pulled notes, his voice trickling crude into Aunt May's Los Angeles living room. ZZ Hill is redemption coated in Texas blood. L and ZZ are one. Their crooning calls to her before the song ends and she restarts. Their voices harmonize mercurial, chaotic as oil gushers, spilling into the fields of Canaan. In the promised land, there are no Negro spirituals, no blues, no white man's hand smiting the Black man's face, but there's always the burden for the Black woman. she knows this song well and she plays it again. Down home blues, down home blues, every other record or two.
Damn.
Yeah,
He was
so,
fired.
oh, thank you. Yeah, so this one, like I said, it was about my Aunt May, but I also like pulling songs, which you do too, Don. You like pulling from music and being inspired by where that music takes you to, or what memories it evokes. And this one is ZZ Hill, Down Home Blues, obviously. But I have a lot of memories that go with songs and my family's reactions to songs. And um, I have the one I'm sure you know about with the Willie Nelson one, where my dad would
Mm.
play the Willie Nelson song after he beat my mom. But this one was definitely after my Aunt May died. She played this. We were living with her because we were homeless, and she took us in. But when Uncle Eljo died, before that, she was like, "I don't care about him. He's no good, worth not a nickel." And but he died, and she went into a mourning that lasted a good week, and she played this song nonstop, full blast. And
Wow.
as soon as it stopped, she'd start it over again, and she was just in mourning. And I will never forget the pain that she had from losing someone that had affected her so much. This was the only man she'd known in her life. And even though he had caused her so much misery, this this man and this song, it was like she was crying to go back to that girl that she was in Texas, to that innocent child that she once was. That it wasn't a mourning of him as much as a mourning of a person she used to be.
Yeah, your poetry is proof that poems give you the news and history, and it's a reason to even have poems in the first place. It really is. These are wonderful recordings of life, and it's so true. I'm sure the students will agree that a certain song is going to conjure so many memories, and our lives is full of those markers. All right, I've got a couple of minutes left, and I know you need to go because you're not feeling well. So I'm going to ask you two quick
I
questions.
like to hang out and listen to William and just sit back quietly and kind of pass
Oh,
out
yeah.
on the chair here. But
If you can do that, you're going to really enjoy William Gonzalez's poetry. He's an excellent poet as well.
yeah, I'd like to do
All right,
that.
well, should I ask you questions now or save it for the end?
Um, you're the boss here, man.
Because I have to admit, in these things, I've been saving it for the end and just asking both poets is what I've been doing.
Okay, well, I'll wait.
Oh,
That dynamic just seems to be better.
Okay,
So we're going to try it. We're going to try it. And it's just a coincidence. When I scroll down, who do I get? Oh. But if you want to say something introductory, William, go ahead before we get to your first poem.
sure. First and foremost, thank you, Katrina, for your amazing poetry. Just I can feel your spirit on the other side of this connection. And we do have a South Central connection. See, Don, I thank you, fellow lifelong learners. My name is William A. Gonzalez. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I was raised by a single mother. I am a great grandson of cotton pickers from El Salvador. My great grandfathers picked cotton. My grandfathers picked cotton. My grandfather picked cotton. My mama picked cotton for a bit. My uncle picked cotton before they both came to the United States of America. I was raised in, and I like to say the sectors that I was raised in because it's very important. Because I've come to realize over the years that it inspires folks from these sectors. I was raised in the Westlake, Pico Union, South Central, and I lived in the Nickerson Gardens in Watts as a youth. And these were the sectors that I navigated through the crack era and through the violence of the 1990s, the early 1990s. And what I didn't know back then was how rich I would become by way of growing up poor. And with that being said, I'll go into my first poem because I don't like to take too much time away from these presentations. Um, what if it's the poem, and it was just something that I wrote when I was younger, and I always questioned why it was that I was growing up in these places that had roaches and rats, and why I was in these boxes, in these apartment complexes and stuff like that. And this poem is also dedicated to all children across America who have never been to the beach and or a mountain trail that come from inner cities. What if instead of an ocean breeze, you saw roaches and rats crawling up and down a wall's plastic crease? What if you never saw a mountain valley, instead you saw a crime-infested ghetto alley? What if many around you died to senseless crime that it became hard to keep tally? What if the lady who read pieces of poetry to your school didn't read one word that would reflect your community, thereby making every single gentle word that came out of her mouth in obscurity? What if the trees you saw had beautiful leaves, but the shadows behind them created a scene of poverty beefs? What if these struggles affected poor people with endless grief? What if most people around you were blind to relevance? Instead, they chose the path of ignorance. What if your soul had no choice but to create a blanket of tolerance? What if most around you were blind to relevance? I repeated that again. Instead, they chose the path of ignorance. What if your soul had no choice but to create a blanket of tolerance? What if your best friend's dad spent his entire life making a living by picking up bottles and cans? What if you were born in America, but your parents were invisible to the eyes of other Americans? What if learning how to tell time also included dodging and weaving through crime? What if 3 decades had gone by and the area you grew up in had not changed at all, like North Korea stuck in time? What if while placing a lunch order inside a local restaurant, you saw a life that was cut short to an act of murder? What if people who lived amongst you had never heard of the word community? What if those same people didn't care for the power of unity? That's what if. And I know I messed up on a few lines, but it's okay to mess up. None of us are perfect. It happens all the
Wow.
time. And
I can see
you'll
that.
find this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You submitted a
No,
photo, so I had a little difficulty trying to get it to scroll, but hopefully I'll get the hang of it. But as you can
kind
see,
of,
yeah, in Williams' poetry,
Beautiful.
again, you can reflect what you see and question it. That's one of the powers of poetry too. And I'm gonna read another one, and I hope this thing will scroll properly.
I love the art that goes with it as well.
I was, I've been inspired by like many people, but Kurt Vonnegut was one of the people that inspired me to do this type of stuff. And because sometimes the images they connect, but I also want to make sure that the students know that you can create art out of any life circumstance. these pieces that I'm reading to you are in this book that I published in 2012. And the picture of the cover of this book is a picture that I took in my community of black bubblegum. This is a real picture of black bubblegum stuck on a sidewalk in Los Angeles, California. And I always used to look at those pieces of black bubblegum, and I always wondered if those pieces of black bubblegum can speak, what kind of stories they would be able to tell, right? And not only that, I also used to think about a lot of the history that remains on top of the black bubblegum that other people spit on and walk on and dogs piss on and so on and so on. And I also want to say, don't be scared, to publish, to go out and put your work out, because people put your work out there because people want to hear your stories. And you don't have to get all fancy too when you do all the, like people like they overly perfume their faces and do all this crazy stuff. I kept it. I just wore a Dodgers shirt, and I was standing right there in a building in front of downtown, and that was my cover, my picture. So don't be afraid to be who you are. I'll go into my next piece. It's a short one. It's redlining, and this is
Time out. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
have
Go
to
ahead. I'm
state,
sorry.
I got to state the obvious because some students going to kick me for not stating the obvious. Okay. Just want to say real quickly about this poem. I know it's obvious that this is a rhyming poem, but if you look carefully, he's got some inventive rhyming going on here, like leafs and beefs, right? Looking for interesting combinations is, it kind of just,
And
it happens, right?
I also
yeah. Sorry.
I like the idea of making a statement by asking a question as well. I find that you get really good poetic work when you do that.
Yeah, it's a whole nother dynamic. Another great writing idea. Write a poem of nothing but questions. Okay. I can see I can't scroll unless I reduce it. So come on, scroll. Scroll. There we go. And then I can bring it up. Okay, there we go. Sorry for the delay. I just had to mention that because it was worth mentioning.
That was it's probably what I sent you out. My stuff's all over the place, so I apologize for that, Don. So the next piece is redlining, and this is just like using the environment, man, as a form of motivation. And it's something that I always kind of thought about, like growing up, in inner city environments, how I always felt like we were all condensed. Like I always felt like we were like, and it's like, and then I always felt like they sold us the same things, like McDonald's, donuts, what I mean, tire shops, blowing up fumes into your community, and how all the buildings were always like all together. It was an interesting situation. So I'll go into the poem Redlining. Redlining wraps around human sardine can communities. Within these red lines, inharmonious sounds echo. Clashing smoggy clouds create black and brown colored pain, an unforgettable historic American stain. And I like to talk about this because a lot of this stuff is calculated. These red lines, and like the great poet Katrina was talking about, there's a lot of this hidden language that they use in politics and local, and local politics and all this stuff, right? And they know what they're doing. A lot uh, of pieces like this of certain people living in certain sectors have they derive from calculated economic apartheid, I call them, because they know, based on what you make and what kind of work you do and all these different factors, they know that they can just throw you in certain communities, and I always found it very interesting in that, like when you live in these type of environments and you're like so condensed like this, it's bound to create things within these communities. And one of the things that it creates is product for white people who practice law and who go fishing for product nonstop till this day in places that are within the redlining environments of not just Los Angeles, but many sectors across the United States of America. And I'll stop there because I'm
Well,
taking
yeah,
it.
redlining, if the students have not heard this term, I'll be surprised if they haven't heard it because redlining is so infamous, right? It's a way for governments to make life harder for some people than others. Then depending on where you live, so goes your insurance rate. Depending on where you live, maybe some things won't be available, like you're gonna have to drive to find a market, things like that. That's what redlining is all about, trying to keep people in certain places and out of others. It's a practice. It's still in the news today. Still in the news today. I was reading the news this morning. There was a couple, an interracial couple, a black husband and a Latino wife, wanted to get their house reappraised. And the reappraisal was lower than its previous value, which is mind-boggling because both of these people work in real estate and they know the values have gone up. So why was it counted down? Because they wanted to refuse them the loan they were asking for, so they lowered the value of the house to make it impossible to get the loan. These are the tricks that are being done to people every day. All right, so we pontificated enough. Let's go for that next poem. Well, if I can get to it, come on, page. There we go.
This one's a little sad, students, but I dedicated this to my friend Antonio Pedro de Bora. He used to live like over, like in the Gage area, like Gage, and I forget what the other street was. It was like Central, I think it's Gage and Central. Might have been Florence and Central area. And we used to go to school together. They used to bus us from South Central all the way to the Valley when we were young. And it was just like our bus was always, it was brown and black children, and we used to go to the Valley. And in the Valley during those times, it was like a lot of, it was different, like Northridge and those places were, there was different. There was like people have money, like white people have money and stuff. When we rolled up, we'd be lunch tickets, and they all had their lunches, and they were rich and all this stuff. And I remember that Antonio used to tell me all the time that he wanted to be a gang member for some gang of Florence. He used to say, "I want to be from Florence," he used to say, with little bell buckle and all this stuff. And I'm like, nah, man, don't do that. I used to like to write. I used to be like a tiger. So I used to like to write words. I always love words. I used to be into that. Nah, just do art, fool, do art. And anyways, we grew up together, and we ended up navigating. We used to date with girls and do all kind of stuff. And so he was very excited when he got his girlfriend pregnant. And I remember that unconsciously, even though I was young, I started seeing a change in him. And so I wrote this poem. It's kind of like just kind of reflecting on what I saw, kind of like that change. And then I always wondered about his baby when the baby was born, kind of deal. So that's how I did write with this poem. It's entitled Almost Here. I am growing inside of my mother's stomach. I get fed through a silly black cord. I can hear my father's voice all the time. He seems to be the most excited for my arrival into the world. My father has attended all of my doctor's visits. He's always saying how there's no way that he would miss it. Today, the ultrasound exposed that I am a girl. My father is so excited that he can't wait to tell. I can feel my parents' excitement. 2 months and I'm scheduled to arrive. The next day will be the first time that I've ever heard my mother cry. On this morning, she was told that last night someone shot my father in the head. Later the same day, she found out that he is now dead. For 7 months, everything was peaceful inside of here. All the emotions nowadays fill this place with painful tears, fears. My day to enter into this world is finally here. My mother is excited, but I can feel my father's invisible bloody tear. Dedicated to Antonio Pedro de Bora, and it's published in black bubblegum. Um, I would like to say one more thing, that a lot of the violence that witnessed and was, that I had to deal with when I was a youngster, for whatever reason, I dedicated a lot of my poems to the young men that lost their life. And I put their names in the book and all that stuff. And because I wanted to somehow preserve something of them, you know. And what happens in a lot of situations in inner city communities is that people don't like to write about these things because they want to pretend like these situations don't exist. But I truly believe that in order to find, at least try to help find solutions for a lot of social issues that go on in inner city communities and abroad, that I think we have to, we have to share this kind of work, and as you can tell, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be shot from the heart, and it can have an impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to put it way too simply, you can write poetry to remember what you want to remember, what you want to be remembered. Another reason to write poetry. And we're down to our last 4 minutes here, so this is the time for the famous 2 questions. One is from the students and one is from me. The student question, they invariably always want to know, how did you become a poet? Who would like to answer that?
I'll go first. Always knew that I would be a writer of some sort, and I started writing stories when I was very young, about 4 years old. And I used to keep a diary, and my father saw my diary and he got mad because I would talk about things that he would do in there. And so I switched to poetry and in order to mask the things I would write about, and that's how I became a poet. And I didn't really call myself a poet until I was in my 20s, and I decided that I would become a poet, but I always wrote poetry.
William?
For me, it was like my love for words, like splattering words on public walls. Like it was through like the chemicals that came off the spray can, and the love of like moving words around and making words rhyme and stuff like that. And that got me intrigued, and it made me like turn what I was doing on the streets and then just write onto paper. And for me, it wasn't really like calling myself a poet, to be honest with you. It was just more of like writing to heal and writing to kind of keep track of what was happening, and in a very unorganized way, to be honest with you, to be completely frank with you. And so to this day, honestly, I still have a hard time calling myself a poet. So I'm more of like I say I'm more like a scribbler. Like I just scribble, like I scribble what's happening in life and in my life and around me and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. It was but I'll say this though, like my love for like reading and writing and all that stuff was injected into me by Mr. Lawrence up in was it Patrick Henry Junior High, and it was because of the way he read the stories, how he got into all the stories and stuff like that, that really kept my passion for like, hey man, keep writing, man, keep writing. And while I shared some of this stuff with you, it's also, and I'm going off a bit a little bit here, but it's also led to so many other things in my life, like connecting, like writing, scribbling, poetry, you can say, and all this stuff into other things in my life. And I'm just grateful, man. I'm grateful for words, man. I'm not even a poet, but I'm grateful for words, man. They heal you. Don't stop writing, kids. Don't stop writing.
We're down to our final minute, but you've already both answered the second question without me even asking it by reading your poems today and showing your passion for sharing what you have to say. I think the students got the message completely, and you are both wonderful examples of people who are dedicated to getting your messages across through poetry. It's the way to make it something more than the news, right? It's more than the news. It's something to discuss and enjoy at the same time because of the celebration of the words. Well, it's been a wonderful series. Students, don't forget, do the worksheet and you get credit for this. I hope you enjoyed meeting all 14 poets. It's been a wonderful time, and I hope we can do this again. Thank you both, Katrina and William. And I'm going to stop the recording here. Just stop?
No.
Or did I just start a second recording?